Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, insurance broker to the stars. And if you're concerned about getting appropriate ransomware coverage on your cyber insurance policy, you probably want to know what cyber insurance companies are actually looking for. So let's go ahead and jump on into it. All right, first let's go ahead and talk about the crazy insurance companies and what type of controls are they looking for? Well, shockingly, pretty much nothing as far as I can tell. Why is that? Well, these are the types of companies where they're only doing external scans, so they're going to have no oversight on any of the internal controls that you would have at your company. So they would have no idea if you even have backups or not, because if it's purely an external scan, maybe they'll know that, hey, such and such port is closed and it's not open, which is good. But any of that internal stuff, which really has to deal with ransomware, they're just not going to know. Now, I will say this probably is not going to last for long. And that's because generally these types of policies or this type of scanning, it's really only for companies that haven't had an issue in the past. So if you're on the lucky side of the score sheet there and you haven't fallen victim to any type of cyber event in, say, the last 3 to 5 years, then you could probably get away with this, but probably not for long, because I would anticipate that, like the more traditional insurance companies doing this, these crazy insurers are going to be racking up humongous losses because they just don't know what those internal controls are. Now, what about the established cyber insurers? So I went and I talked to a few underwriters at various insurance companies that are pretty established in the cyber insurance market. And I said, hey, what do you guys actually care about? So when you're looking at, possibly increasing or limiting the sublimit on these cyber extortion events, what is it that you're actually looking for? Now, of course, this is the ideal list. Obviously, not every company can do this. They may not have the resources or the capabilities to have all of these in place. But nonetheless, this is what the general consensus was. So at a maximum, a 48-hour recovery period following some type of cyber extortion event, that's going to limit business interruption costs. They're going to look for a 3-2-1 backup strategy. And ideally, at least one of those backups is going to be offline and regularly tested. Now, if you have cloud backups, which is becoming more common, they're going to want to see that that's protected by some sort of two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And of course, business continuity disaster recovery plan that's regularly tested, as well as an incident response plan that hopefully you haven't tested, but at least you've run through that to make sure that everybody knows what their particular jobs are and who has to do what given various cyber event or breach scenarios. Now, what is to be seen in this marketplace is how these external scanning companies are actually going to proceed after a breach or a ransomware event. And what do I mean by that? Well, if on the front end they're just writing the policy based on an external scan, what I haven't seen yet is what those particular companies are doing following some type of, say, ransomware or cyber event. Are they going to now go back and have all the same requirements or recommendations, I should say, of minimum requirements that the more traditional and established cyber insurance companies are? I would say that's probably likely that they're going to do that. But these type of external scanning companies, they're so new, and I haven't written a lot of those policies yet. I just haven't had the opportunity to really see the fallout, as it were, from those companies. It's also kind of questionable if those companies are even going to remain solvent, or if they're just going to be taking massive losses, and then from there it's just they'll be gone. Another cyber insurance company in the history books. It's also going to be seen if these best practices that I talked about before at the established cyber insurance companies, if those are eventually going to become hard requirements. And if I had to put my money down, I would say eventually those are just going to be hard requirements because, frankly, they're not overly expensive. They're not overly burdensome. And so I would bet that if you don't have them already, they're going to become a hard requirement. Now, it is going to depend upon the insurer on what their specific requirements are and how failing to have some of those best practices in place will actually impact the availability of insurance, even getting a quote or the various sublimits that they're going to offer. I have already seen that companies that don't have the preponderance of those best practices down, that the established cyber insurance companies are drastically limiting the cyber extortion sublimit that's available to them. So that sublimit would deal with essentially everything revolving around ransomware. So I've seen companies that don't have the preponderance of those controls in place, and they're literally getting a tenth of what was previously available. So instead of 500,000 in coverage, maybe they only get 50,000 in coverage. And once you're talking about 10% of coverage available compared to what you had last year for a cyber extortion or a ransomware event, that is not a good place to be. So if you're going to be in that position, obviously you're going to have to get those controls in place. Now, all that being said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So yes, it's most likely that the controls that you're going to put in place are going to be that cost is going to far outweigh any savings in premium that you're going to get, at least for now and for most companies. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to lessen the pain that's associated with a cyber extortion or a ransomware event. So if you have a cyber insurance policy and you don't have appropriate backups, maybe you're going to get the insurance and then you're going to have a ransomware event. If there's just nothing appropriate to back up to, or those backups are so outdated or they're so corrupted that the insurance company or the forensics guy, the data recovery guy, they just can't do anything with them, you're just setting yourself up for a ton of unnecessary pain and potential bankruptcy, depending on how your company operates. And don't forget that some of those requirements, or those best practices, I should say, from the established cyber insurance companies, you may actually have legal requirements to be doing some of that stuff already. So don't forget if there's a legal requirement. So just because it's not a strict requirement from an insurance company, it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And it also doesn't mean that it may not be something that you're legally required to be doing anyways. And of course, after an event, I'm just going to say it's likely it's just going to be a de facto requirement anyways. So either those scanning type crazy cyber insurance companies just won't offer a renewal to you. They're only looking at clean risks. And then, of course, you have to go to the broad market. They're going to pretty much require that you have that in place. Or as I said before, you're going to see some pretty severe limitations that could have a massive impact on your business. So that's really not an area that I would tread lightly in. So all of this kind of wrapping together, just because it's not required doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Get those basic internal controls in place that I talked about before. With that, this is Damage Control, Cyber Insurance, and Compliance. That is where you can download it for free. If you want to keep my wife happy, you can purchase a physical or Kindle version on Amazon. And with that, stay safe.